97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Caplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
We expect to win every time we step on the field. That's just the mindset and the culture that we have.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It drops tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Get all the latest and greatest from Adam Caplan, Jeff Mosher, and the guys at InsideTheBirds.com on the Inside the Birds podcast. And don't forget the Inside the Birds pregame show with Adam, Jeff, Trey Thomas, and Greg Cosell. Right now, it is NFL insider Adam Caplan from Inside the Birds podcast at InsideTheBirds.com. And it's brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. They'll match your first deposit up to $250 when you sign up. Now, let's bring Adam Caplan into the conversation. A lot to get to as the Eagles get ready for the Ravens on Sunday. Adam, welcome back, pal. How are you?
Guys, good to talk to you this fine Thursday with the weather beautiful, and we're into week 6, and we might have some good news on the injury front for the Eagles.
Well, let's dive into some things because I know Will Parks, a lot of people seem to be buzzing about him and some interesting possibilities on what he might bring. He got activated into the 21-day window, so will we see the return of Parks? Maybe a minor thing to some, but it could be a big thing to this defense. Yeah,
so let's take sort of a macro overview of why they signed him and what their plan was based on my people I've spoken with. So their plan for Will Parks is for him to play what's called the star role. Not all of it, but a lot of what Malcolm Jenkins has done in recent years or had done in recent years for the Eagles, and be more of a box safety and also cover tight ends, by the way. This is obviously something the Eagles have been abominable at so far this season. Really, Eric Ebron dropped a pass. He also had another pass he should have caught last week, but the Eagles have been bad against the tight end. They're giving up the most production against opposing tight ends. So Will Parks would be a hybrid player. And he's got good size, and that's kind of what they're looking for. Now, the issue is here with his hamstring. He had a significant hamstring strain. It's not known yet, A, if he'll play, or B, if he does, how much he'll play. But based on the information I have, it's trending like he could have a very good chance of playing. Now, we have to see how he reacts to today's practice, how he does after tomorrow's abbreviated practice, because remember, practice is on Friday, very short, for Sunday games, and then how he does in the walkthrough. But right now, things are trending well, and if he doesn't play this week, he would probably play the following week, which would be week 7. So that's good. That's good news, and this is a guy that they have a big plan for here. Jim Schwartz has been under fire, and rightfully so, but he also has been shorthanded at the cornerback position, at the safety position, at the linebacker position, as we know. So there could be some reinforcements coming very, very soon.
We had Nick Ferguson on from Denver back when they signed Will Parks, and he brought up that dime, linebacker, safety, and corner, basically a Swiss Army knife. Would that mean that he could assume the role that we saw Nate Gerry stuck in on Sunday?
It's called a jack linebacker is the term. He might do some of that. I just tell you that what I was told pretty strongly was that he would see some of Malcolm Jenkins' role, and do some other things. The big thing is they want him to cover tight ends. That's probably going to be part of it. Yeah, and look, in dime, if you're only going to play with one linebacker, yes, you could see something like that because he's 215 pounds, and Gary's around 230. And remember, Gary was a safety in college, so it's certainly part of it. But the fact of the matter is this is a guy that I'm told they had big plans for, and it's unfortunate. Remember when the Eagles actually put it out there that he was going to be out on injury reserve. I'm like, where's this coming from? Like, because they didn't have preseason, so it was kind of hard to understand. But one other thing is the Eagles call these players like this positionless players, and he's going to be a jack of all trades type of player once he's ready to go.
Coming off of the injury, could he do a good enough job stopping the tight end? Because obviously we know Nate Gerry can't do it. So, the injury, it's going to play a role. Can he do a good enough job?
Yeah, that's his role. That's his role there, and that's exactly what they want him to do. That's exactly what they want him to do.
Well, let's. I know this has kind of been talked about a lot, the whole play that happened there, and nobody seemed to really answer the question. But I guess the question I would have for you, Adam, is we've seen the stats now on Gerry, 23 for 23 when teams go at him. Is this a product of they just don't have anybody better?
Yeah.
I mean, is that essentially what it like? But isn't that a problem with the other guys in the film room? If they're looking at this guy, the morale's got to be terrible in that room if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have what you have as a coach. You're using the guys that you have, and they're in a crisis situation at linebacker with the Jatavius Brown retirement abruptly. No one saw that coming. You have the numbers that you have, and Pro Football Focus have that number. Now, what some people will say is that some of those coverage numbers are not on him, and there's some truth to that. But the fact of the matter is, we know that Nate Gerry shouldn't be on the field, but you have what you have. And Jeff Mosher and I have talked about this. Ken Flagel, the linebackers coach, he uses him as like he's his own son. He thinks he's a good football player, and he does what he's asked to do. But the results are obviously less than average, and that's pretty much their linebacker group. So that's kind of where they're at, and they have this group, and they're going to go forward with it. And the other thing is, people want better coverage linebackers. As someone who works for another team told me this week, or I think it was this like Monday or Sunday night, good coverage linebackers are not available. No one's trading you a coverage linebacker. It doesn't work that way. So, I mean, the trade deadline's coming up in a couple weeks here. The Eagles have to find somebody because they clearly are not interested in the guys on the street. I mean, they've not worked anyone out really in weeks at that position.
Wow. We know Gerry was a little bit of a problem there, but overall, was he the only problem? What happened to the defense last week against the Steelers?
Yeah, Mike, this is surprising. Not that the Eagles got toasted. I thought they'd get blown out or potentially get blown out. I didn't see them score 29 points on offense. But the thing that surprises is they did not get a pass rush. But the way that the Steelers did it is that really overall, they got it out of Ben Roethlisberger's hands, and that to me is the way you negate a great pass rush. The Eagles definitely have right now, if not the best pass rush, one of the top three pass rushers, and front fours particularly. They have great depth on their defensive line, but it was very clear to me that the offensive coordinator Randy Fichtner had a great game plan. He saw what the D-line did to the Niners and said, "Hey, it's not going to happen." And also, Roethlisberger audibled when he saw stuff he didn't like, and that's. That you're going to see more of that, guys. You're going to see the quarterback get out of his hands, and I'm really looking forward to see what Atlantic City's own Greg Roman does this Sunday, because the Eagles have an incredible pass rush, and I do wonder if Jim Schwartz will, because of the oddity of the way that they run their run game. They have the most sophisticated run game in the National Football League, way harder, believe it or not, than the Niners. It's really hard to figure out. They do so much stuff, and misdirection, by the way, is coming, folks. You've seen it, and you saw how many mixed direction plays and gadget plays that the Steelers beat them on. I'm sure that Greg Roman's going to have his handful for the Eagles this Sunday.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought Roman up, and I was wondering, you got Andrews, you got Lamar, you've got Ingram, and you mentioned that. I mean, I did some research today on this. They've given up 13 carries, 154 yards, and 3 touchdowns to wide receivers so far this year. I mean, heck, they've only given up 382 carries to running backs, so they're getting whipped on that play constantly. The tight ends have 31 catches for 322. I'm sure that Roman is salivating looking at this defense.
I know. Mark Andrews, who's a guy that not a lot of people know about coming out of Alabama, and the reason why he does so well is defenses are so consumed with trying to stop Lamar Jackson. And Andrews just runs free, usually in the middle of the secondary. So that's one thing to take a look at. And you're going to see Hollywood Brown, their first-round pick last year, wide receiver, scored last week in the red zone against Washington. But he is super explosive. And if Darius Slay can't play, they're in major trouble. The good news is at least Avonte Maddox is practicing, but they've got major issues now at corner. I mean, it's just Mike, the issue is this: the miss on Sidney Jones and the miss on Rasul Douglas, it's crushing them on the outside. They really need an outside corner opposite Slay, and they just don't have one who I think is really ready to go. And they're going to have to go with Craig James and probably a committee if Darius Slay cannot play.
Well, you bring up Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas, and they're succeeding elsewhere. Is that the product of Jim Schwartz and his scheme that he runs? Like, what is it? The injuries with Sidney Jones? What do you see that they're doing so well there that they couldn't do here?
No, it's really not that. It's just that he's playing because they have nobody else. The Jaguars, folks, remember Jalen Ramsey long gone. AJ Boye was traded to the Broncos. The guys who are picking those guys are hurt, so they have to play him, and he's doing a good job. He's having to play. They don't have anywhere else to go. They literally are barren at the quarterback position, and good for him. Here he was just not very competitive. He just didn't play very well, and it was a giant miss by the Eagles. But nobody think of it this way: they couldn't even trade the guy. Nobody wanted him. I mean, he cleared waivers. The Jaguars brought him in, and that's kind of where he's at. And good for him. I'm glad that he's getting a chance to play. But man, I'll tell you what, the Rasul Douglas one is unbelievable. How about him playing 2 weeks ago every single defensive snap for the Panthers? Unbelievable.
Great. And by the way, all of a sudden, Nelson Aguilar has great hands.
How about that? Yeah, how about that? You see that? I retweeted that stat,
yes.
That number from the. I was talking to the Raiders. It's funny you mentioned him. I talked to them before their game last week against the Chiefs. They brought up to me how happy he is to be with the Raiders, and he's healthy. By the way, I believe he had a scope on his knee after last season. But you brought up his hands. He dropped too many passes, and he's doing a great job there. It's crazy what happens. And then, by the way, there's another player named Ryan Neal, guys. Ryan Neal was cut by the Eagles 2 years ago. He was in training camp with him. He's an undrafted free agent. He played every snap either this past game or the 2 games ago for the Seattle Seahawks in the secondary. I mean, it's amazing how many of these guys that leave the Eagles and then they wind up playing well or playing a lot.
It's like the Phillies bullpen. It's like you pitch somewhere else, you pitch great. You get them in Philly, the worst. Workman was 10-1 last year for Boston with a 193. He comes here, horrible. It's like the reverse all of a sudden. Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds podcast is dropping tomorrow, 6 a.m. Couple other things let's get to. Travis Fulgham. What do we do here? I mean, do they have to keep playing him even if everybody's back? Like, what's the plan for him moving forward? Do they just kind of back themselves into finding something here?
Well, just one thing. The Eagles say that Jackson and Jeffrey were limited again on Thursday, so we'll see what they do tomorrow. So with Travis Fulgham, this is interesting. So I talked to the Lions and just talked to a lot of people around the league, and he was a kid that really was more or less recruited, but had to earn a scholarship. There was only one school that recruited him or even talked to him. That was Old Dominion. He had a very different upbringing. He wasn't really a guy that had the pedigree of football. His parents were very, very sharp, and no one really thought he'd ever make it, though he had great size and athleticism. And you move on here, and when he went to Old Dominion, when he finally got things right, he looked like a kid that could actually play in the National Football League. But just talking to the Lions and other people, he didn't have a lot of urgency when he was with them, and he was cut twice, and then the Packers cut him. And Mike, I was at his first practice at training camp, and I was blown away with what the kid was doing. And I just, it's training camp, and if I've learned my lesson where I've been wrong in player evaluations, because I've deemed training camp and preseason AAA baseball. It's not real. It's just you look at the attributes and you make a note of it. You guys remember Hank Baskett?
Sure.
You guys are old enough to remember Hank Baskett? Well, Hank Baskett
Mr. Lehigh.
Yes, he was Mr. Lehigh, Mr. Preseason. I've never seen a player dominate when he did, and he was nowhere to be seen in the regular season. It was really, really bad. So, but here's the difference. Fulgham, I'm told, guys, every regular season practice dominated, like really, really good, so much so that they didn't have a choice. He had to play, and he's answered the bell. Now, let's be realistic. There's no way he's putting up those kind of numbers, 10 catches on 13 targets and 150 yards on a touchdown. That's not happening every week. But he has a realistic chance to be very, very productive. And for him to continue to start when Jeffrey's ready to go, he just has to continue to play well. By the way, he has a real chance to start the rest of the season at that X position over Jeffrey. But he's got to keep doing. He's just got to show up, play with that same urgency and physicality. And here's another little nugget. Someone told me, and it's probably true, just from watching him, he's got the best hands at wide receiver of anyone they have.
Well,
think about that.
Adam,
he's only played 2 games.
It's clear, almost to a fault at some points that Wentz trusts him and only him. I mean, there was a play.
How about that?
Well, on the one drive, he's connected on 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and Sanders is wide open, but he throws the ball to Fulgham because that's who he's locked in on, and it's a 3rd down, and he doesn't complete the pass. But, hey, it's the one guy he trusts.
And Mike, he actually missed Fulgham for a touchdown. We had Ron Jaworski on our Inside the Birds television with Mosher and I, and Jaws confirmed what I had put on our show, I think Monday morning or Wednesday morning, that Fulgham made this incredible move. I think he beat Joe Hayden. It would have been a touchdown, but he wasn't even looking that way. I forget where the pass went to. It wasn't really Carson's fault because I don't think Fulgham was the primary on it, but nevertheless, It's really remarkable what Fulgham's doing. And again, folks, they face a great defense this week. I'm not expecting them to have another huge game. But if you're in fantasy football, I certainly would pick them up and see what happens. But it's really been a remarkable story. And think about it, guys. Not only were they not being last week's game to score 29 points, they were not being the Niners. Fulgham was a big reason why they won. Without him, they would not have been the Niners for sure.
So, okay, let's throw this scenario out there. Jackson's back, Rieger's back, Jeffrey's back, Goddard's back. You're playing 12 personnel. Greg Ward, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I say Whiteside because he's a second-round pick. That's the only reason why I'm throwing him in there. But where does Fulgham – if Jackson, Rieger, Jeffrey, Goddard are all healthy, where does Fulgham get snaps? Do one of them sit on the sideline?
Yeah, it'll be after the week 9 bye. Week 10 will be the earliest to have everybody. Although Rager's doing well. Most reported on our pregame show that he got the cast off his surgically repaired thumb. But we were both told that he's still, the timeline's week 10, with a unbelievably outside shot for week 8. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but this kid, I'm told, is amazing at recovery from injuries, so we'll see. But again, they think it's going to be 10. I think, remember now, once they pull Rager off if they pull the receivers on the 53 now, that means that if you activate Rager once, by week 10, that means they would have 8 receivers on the team, on the 53-man roster. You would only dress 5 and maybe 6 if you had to. To me, Wallace would be out. Not Wallace. Watkins. Watkins would be a guy that wouldn't dress. Arcega-Whiteside probably wouldn't dress. And maybe you dress. Greg Ward wouldn't go anywhere. He's their main slot receiver. And then what would happen is Rager would back up Jackson and Z. Probably would back. Now again, if Fulgham continues to be their main X, because Jeffrey would then share time with him or be the backup at X. Rager would probably back up 2 or 3 spots, and they would probably go that way. This is just me kind of looking at your question, because Rager, I'm told, was probably going to learn all 3 positions had he not gotten hurt. So they love him, by the way. It's just unfortunate he's now had 2 injuries, but that's a good problem to have, by the way. They would love to have all these guys healthy. Now, one more thing, though, I want to add to your question. It's a really good one in terms of 12 and 11 personnel. I don't think they would play as much 12 personnel because you have so many receivers. It gives you the optionality for each game, Mike, to kind of vary it up. You don't have to be so 12 intensive. And I think that's the way they would look at it if everybody at tight end and receiver are healthy.
I want to get your thoughts on John Hightower, because there was the play at the end of the end of the first half in the end zone. I think you got to catch that, and then he also had the out of bounds play where he didn't get out of bounds, and it costed them a turnover late. What have you seen out of John Hightower, especially last week?
Yeah, Hunter, I don't think he looked that great. I mean, he's okay. I mean, he made a couple nice catches, but he's just not strong physically. And this is something, I know he was around 185 in training camp. He needs to put on at least 5 pounds of muscle, probably more than that. Over time, he's another one who needs an off season. He's just not strong enough, and that to me is the ultimate issue. I think he'd be the other guy. Probably would stay on the roster. They're not going to cut him, but I don't know that he'd play very much. You really want him as your 5th receiver if you have everybody back, not a starting receiver. That's where when Rager comes back, I think Hightower is not going to play very much, if at all. I don't know that he even dresses. If they're all available, I just don't see him playing. Because you don't need 6 receivers active unless one of them's hurt.
Right, and right now he's getting the most snaps on the team. So if he goes from getting the most snaps to none, that's a big upgrade. Real quick, Adam Caplan, Lane Johnson, and his status potentially for this weekend. Yeah,
still very questionable. The thing is, and Doug Peterson was asked about this, why don't you just shut him down? Because he keeps leaving early. They don't seem to want to do that. Look, I'm told the second opinion was kind of what they thought. He had, as we first reported on our Inside the Birds pregame show, he had the tightrope surgery. That's a very unique surgery. Not a lot of players have it. And although Tua had it at Alabama and a couple other players, including Eagles' Jalen Hurts, but when you look at it with Lane, until he could just show that he's ready to go, I mean, I don't know why they won't just play Jack Driscoll over him, but my understanding is that they just want to see if he could do anything this week. And, right now, Lane did not practice today, and it's kind of where it's at. And remember, tomorrow's a very late practice, guys. If he doesn't practice tomorrow, I do not think he will play.
Then, of course, you got Mailata and that Peters. Peters is going to be in his third
I want
week.
to talk about that. Yeah, real quick. He looked really good, I'm told. he's almost a rookie because he just, it's his first game. He's never played before until the season. But I'll tell you what, he did a really good job considering who he went up against. And I do believe he could take Peter's job there at left tackle. I could certainly see them, if everything works out well, for Mailata to keep the job. If he does play well this week and continues to play well, once Peters returns, and Peters takes over the right guard job because Matt Pryor simply has not played very well so far.
Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds podcast drops tomorrow, 6 a.m. The Inside the Birds pregame show. They've had breaking news on the pregame show the last couple of weeks, so 10 a.m. to get you ready for the Eagles and the Ravens. It's a great way to start your Sunday morning with Inside the Birds pregame show. Adam Caplan, Jeff Mosher, Trey Thomas, and Greg Cosell. Adam, pleasure, pal.
Guys, thank you.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline, and that, of course, is brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250.